So, without further ado, I'm going to introduce my partner in crime, Rob, who is going to rant, apparently. So, be prepared.
Half of you people are pretty prepared for me to rant anyway, I would think. I wanted to write a thing about why we're doing Witness, and certainly why I'm doing Witness. And I spent this week, it's first week back at uni, and so I spent this week lecturing first and second and third years about the history of Australian theatre, squeezing 200 or so years of European traditions of theatre into about an hour and a half. And I can do that now if that's something you want, but just log into the website. And rather that, I've got what can best be described as a rant. And it's called I Worry. I worry. I worry we're going around in circles. I worry those circles are shrinking. Australian performance in the European tradition has a history of over 200 years here, and prior to colonisation, thousands. I worry that a lot of us think Australian theatre sprang fully formed from the heads of Tyrone Guthrie, John Sumner, Robert Quentin and Hugh Hunt, wealthy, cultured Englishmen all. I worry that a lot more of us don't even know who they were. What do people think happened here before the summer of the 17th doll? There are vague notions of an ancient monolith known as J.C. Williamson's that was somehow the antithesis of all that is good and alternative and cultural. A kind of popular entertainment Walmart crushing out the Australian artistic impulse all around it. And before that there were convicts, right? And some of them staged the recruiting officer to celebrate the King's birthday for an audience who paid for their seats in flour and rum. I worry about statements like there was no theatre in Australia before 1950. That Australians weren't used to hearing an Australian accent on stage, and that Australians don't get theatre. I worry that these statements reinforce the idea of Australia as a cultural wasteland. I worry that this implicit imperialism, this colonial servility, is a sad kind of cultural Stockholm syndrome. I worry that this was a way of centralising intellectual and cultural authority in the hands of a privileged few. I worry that this has not changed, and in the intervening years has only gotten worse. I worry that in these ideas, these imaginings of who we are, you can still hear the clank of chains. I worry that we think film and television killed mainstream theatre, that they can do spectacle and realism better than us, so the general audience would rather stay home or go to the cinema. I worry that people call cinemas theatres. I worry that we feel like going to the theatre makes us who go somehow special or different or better. I worry that these feelings are the creeping foundations of white middle-class privilege. I worry that the Australia Council statistics say that 30% of Australians attended or participated in theatre or dance in the past 5 years. And I worry that we think that's good enough. The most I worry for is the other 70%. Sure, they go to music, they go to libraries, they go to galleries, but I worry that we have abandoned them to the TV and the cinema and their advertisers to feed them their stories about who they are. I worry that we hush each other and demand silent reverential awe for the magic taking place on stage in that unattainable space where only the beautiful and the lucky are allowed. I worry that we creep around these places like palaces or tombs, attending to the solemn duty of demonstrating our culture by performing Going to the Theatre. I worry that we've forgotten that theatre and dance are live social experiences, that these are not passive, sit in the dark and pretend you're not there experiences, that live performance is a vital process in the functioning of the system we think of as society, that it confronts us with our fears, our prejudices, our triumphs, our better natures, our humanity, each other. It is, or was, a coming together to be a part of a collective act of empathy, not adjacent to one. And that requires more than just rapt attention and respectful silence. Perhaps all this can be blamed, as with so much else, on Plato and Aristotle, but that old black magic catharsis can't be achieved in silent repose. An audience needs to speak to be able to process. To each other, back to the performance. If live performance isn't a conversation between the stage, the pit and the stalls, then it might as well be cinema. So maybe we should also blame Ibsen and Chekhov for the fourth wall. I believe that there is a deep need in our community for a space to respond socially to performance. I believe and have long believed that the performance community needs a place where it can gather, talk, reflect, challenge and grow. A place to deconstruct the complex experiences offered by the artists amongst us. A place to learn what happened here before yesterday and in light of it to make sense of today. Until recently, much of this activity took place in the arts sections of our newspapers, but the comparatively drastic loss of them has caused a shift in how these conversations are conducted. Reviews, for instance, have shrunk beyond any kind of genuine usefulness as anything more than marketing. I worry that we have forgotten that what was important about this work on paper was how it served as a bridge between art and its audience. That these often maligned, often deserving critics did most of the heavy lifting for us, allowing us to sit back in the not very comfortable seats in the dark and wonder about what we'll have for dinner after the show. But criticism, the active process of interrogating a work, an experience, a moment, is not and should never have been the sole purview of an enlightened few. It's the job of all of us. It's a very 19th century idea to think that only a few amongst many are so special as to have the authority to speak for all. And I think that's an idea that has long since come to the end of its usefulness. If we can't speak about the art we're making and seeing, then what is the point of the art at all? The place for this process, of course, doesn't need to be on paper. It can be carried out just as well online, and of course, it's best in person. Making sense of art is not a secondary process. The whole of the community, artists, critics, and audience included, make sense of art as it happens. We make sense together. Thank you. I now return you to your regularly scheduled drinking.